Marcus Kane stepped off the transport shuttle and into the massive space station. The metal walls stretched high above him, covered in strange alien writing that glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of different creatures moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others crawled on 4 or 6 legs. A few floated in the air, using technology he could not see. Kane looked like any other human diplomat. He wore a simple black suit and carried a plain briefcase. His gray hair was neat, and his face showed no emotion. To anyone watching, he seemed like a boring government worker. But his eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail around him. The Galactic Council Station was neutral ground. No weapons were supposed to be here. No fighting was allowed. This was where different alien races came to talk and make deals. Today, they would decide if humans could join their galactic community or if Earth would become a slave world. Ambassador Kane? A thin blue alien approached him. I am your guide. The council is waiting. Kane nodded and followed the alien through the corridors. As they walked, he noticed the security cameras, the guard positions, and the escape routes. Old habits never died. He had been doing this kind of observation for 30 years, first as a soldier, and now as a diplomat. They entered a huge circular room with seats arranged in rings around a central platform. Hundreds of aliens sat in groups based on their species. The largest group belonged to the Hegemony, a military alliance that controlled most of the galaxy. The Craxi warriors were easy to spot. They looked like 7-foot-tall lizards with sharp teeth and claws. Their scales were dark green, and their yellow eyes glowed with hunger for violence. Next to them sat the Veltar, pale creatures with large heads and thin bodies. They could read minds and control thoughts. The Zephyrians looked almost human, except for the metal parts grafted into their skin. They were masters of technology and machines. Kane took his seat in the human section, which had only 1 chair. Earth had sent just 1 representative, while other species had dozens. This was another insult. But Kane did not react. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Look at the human, one of the Craxi warriors said loudly. One small creature thinks it can speak for its entire species. Other aliens laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Kane continued reading his tablet, as if he had heard nothing. Prime Minister Thakmor of the Craxi stood up. He was the largest alien in the room, with battle scars covering his scales and metal implants in his skull. The Hegemony has reviewed Earth's request to join the galactic community, he announced. Your species is too young and too violent. You fight each other constantly. You destroy your own planet. Why should we trust you with access to the galaxy? Kane stood slowly and walked to the center platform. His movements were calm and controlled. Prime Minister Thakmor honored delegates. He began in a quiet voice that somehow carried to every corner of the room. Humanity acknowledges its past conflicts. We have learned from our mistakes. We seek only peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. Thakmor laughed. A harsh sound like breaking glass. Peaceful? Your species has been at war for its entire history. You cannot even achieve peace on one small planet. We prefer to call it experience, Kane replied. His voice remained calm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. We have learned many lessons about conflict resolution. Lessons? Thakmor stepped closer to the human. Even from the elevated platform, the alien towered over Kane. What could a primitive species teach the galaxy about anything? Kane's hand moved slightly, and Thakmor suddenly froze. The alien's eyes widened as he stared at the human's face. Something in Kane's expression had changed, just for a moment. It was like watching a mask slip and seeing something dangerous underneath. Perhaps, Kane said softly, we could demonstrate our conflict resolution skills. The chamber fell silent. Even the other species that had been laughing stopped talking. They sensed something had changed, though they could not understand what. Thokmor recovered quickly and laughed again, but it sounded forced. The human threatens us. Did you hear that? This proves humans are too violent for civilized society. I made no threat, Kane said. I merely suggested a demonstration. Your words sound like threats to me, Thokmor snarled. He stepped down from his elevated position and moved closer to Kane. Perhaps you need to learn respect for your superiors. Kane did not move as the massive alien approached. He stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, watching Thokmor with the same calm expression. But his eyes tracked every movement, measured every step, calculated every angle. I show respect to those who earn it, Kane said quietly. Thokmor roared in anger and swung his clawed hand at Kane's face. The human moved just enough to let the claws pass inches from his nose. The alien's momentum carried him forward, and Kane stepped aside like a dancer avoiding a clumsy partner. Impressive reflexes for a primitive, Thokmor said, breathing heavily. But reflexes will not save your species from judgment. Kane straightened his tie and smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant smile. Prime Minister, you seem upset. Perhaps we should take a break so you can compose yourself. The other delegates watched in fascination. Most had never seen anyone speak to a Kraxi warrior with such calm disrespect. Some began to wonder if there was more to this quiet human than met the eye. Thokmor's scales darkened with rage, his claws extended fully and his tail lashed behind him. You dare mock me, human? You forget your place. Kane's expression never changed. I never forget anything, Prime Minister. That is one of the things that makes humans unique. The alien raised his hand again. But this time, Kane did not move. Thokmor's claws came down hard across the human's face, drawing 3 lines of blood from his cheek to his jaw. Kane touched the blood with one finger and looked at it calmly. Then he looked up at Thokmor with eyes that suddenly seemed much older and infinitely more dangerous. Thank you, Prime Minister, Kane said softly. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some aliens shouted in outrage at the assault on a diplomat. Others cheered Thokmor for putting the human in his place. Kane stood perfectly still, blood running down his face, but his eyes never left the Kraxi Prime Minister. You struck a diplomatic representative, Kane said in the same calm voice. Under galactic law, this is an act of war against my species. Thokmor laughed and wiped Kane's blood from his claws. War? Your pathetic planet has 12 billion humans. The hegemony has 12 trillion soldiers across 1,000 worlds. You would be extinct before your primitive rockets could reach our nearest outpost. Kane nodded, as if considering this information. An interesting calculation. Have you factored in human adaptability rates? Guards, Thokmor roared. This human threatens the hegemony. Teach it proper respect. 6 Kraxi warriors moved toward Kane from different directions. Each one was twice his size and armed with energy weapons. The other delegates watched in fascination and horror. This was supposed to be a diplomatic meeting, not a gladiator arena. Kane set down his briefcase carefully and stood with his hands at his sides. The first guard reached him and grabbed Kane's shoulder with one massive, clawed hand. Kane did not resist. Kneel before your betters, human, the guard growled. Kane looked up at the alien. I have not knelt to anyone in 23 years. I do not plan to start today. The guard snarled and drove his fist into Kane's stomach. The human doubled over but did not fall. The second guard hit him across the back, dropping Kane to one knee. The other guards joined in, striking him with fists and weapon butts. Through it all, Kane's mind worked with mechanical precision. Guard 1 favored his right hand, probably an old injury to the left. Guard 2 had augmented strength implants, but slower reflexes. Guard 3 wore ceremonial armor with weak points at the joints. Guard 4 carried a plasma rifle with a 7-second recharge cycle. Guards 5 and 6 were younger, probably inexperienced in real combat. The security cameras recorded everything. Good. This would be broadcast across the galaxy as proof of hegemony dominance. Except Kane was counting on that. He needed witnesses for what came next. Enough! The voice belonged to Ambassador Velnash of the Centauri Republic. This is a violation of diplomatic protocols. The human is under council protection. The human forfeited protection when it threatened the hegemony, Talkmore replied. We are merely defending ourselves. Kane struggled to his feet, his suit torn and bloody. His briefcase had been knocked over, spilling documents across the floor. The papers looked like standard diplomatic files, but Kane knew better. They contained detailed intelligence on every species in this room. Information he had gathered during 3 years of diplomatic missions to alien worlds. The Veltar delegate, mind-reader Seklon, suddenly stiffened in his seat, his large black eyes fixed on Kane with growing alarm. Telepaths could sense surface thoughts, and what he was picking up from the human's mind terrified him. Prime Minister, Seklon called out urgently, I advise caution. This human is not what he appears to be. Talkmore ignored the warning. He stepped closer to Kane and backhanded him across the face, sending the human stumbling backward. Your species needs to learn its place in the galaxy. Perhaps when we conquer Earth, we will keep a few humans as pets. Kane wiped blood from his mouth and smiled. It was a cold, predatory expression that made several nearby delegates unconsciously move away from him. Conquer Earth? Kane said quietly. Prime Minister, you misunderstand our relationship. You see, I am not here to beg for membership in your council. He straightened his torn jacket and looked around the chamber at all the watching aliens. His voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. I am here to deliver a message. Earth has been watching the hegemony for some time now. We have studied your military capabilities, your technology, your tactics. We have analyzed your strengths and your weaknesses. Talkmore's scales darkened with suspicion. What are you saying, human? Kane picked up one of the scattered papers from the floor. It was a detailed schematic of a Craxi warship with all its weak points clearly marked. He held it up for everyone to see. I am saying that humanity has been preparing for this meeting for a very long time. We knew you would never accept us as equals. We knew you would try to intimidate us. We knew you would eventually resort to violence. He dropped the paper and looked directly at Talkmore. We were counting on it. The Craxi Prime Minister stared at the schematic, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to the first hint of fear. How did you get classified hegemony ship designs? Kane smiled again, and this time, several guards actually stepped backward. The same way we got classified information on Veltar psychic defenses, Zephyrian computer networks, and the personal files of every leader in this room. Seklon, the mind reader, suddenly stood up, his face pale with terror. Everyone needs to leave this chamber immediately. This human is not a diplomat. He is a weapon. Kane nodded appreciatively. Telepaths are so perceptive. Yes. Mind reader Seklon, you are quite correct. I am not primarily a diplomat. He began walking slowly toward Talkmore. His movements suddenly different. Gone was the careful gait of a government official. Now he moved like a predator, stalking prey. Each step precise and purposeful. My real job title is Colonel Marcus Kane, Earth Special Forces, retired. Perhaps you know me by my operational call sign. He paused and looked directly into Talkmore's eyes. The ghost of Proxima. The effect was immediate. Every hegemony delegate in the chamber froze. The ghost of Proxima was a legend, a nightmare story they told young soldiers. The human who had single-handedly destroyed 3 separate alien invasion fleets. The monster who had killed 8,000 Craxi warriors in the caves of Proxima Centauri without losing a single human soldier. Impossible, Talkmore whispered. The ghost is dead. We killed him on Proxima. Kane shook his head slowly. No, Prime Minister. You killed 8,000 of your soldiers trying to find me. I walked out of those caves and accepted a promotion to the diplomatic corps." He reached into his jacket, and Thakmor instinctively stepped back. But Kane only pulled out a small device that looked like a communication tablet. "This is a formal declaration," Kane said, his voice now carrying the authority of a battlefield commander. "You have assaulted a diplomatic representative of Earth. You have threatened conquest of human territory. You have voided all diplomatic agreements between our species." He pressed a button on the device, and every screen in the chamber came to life, showing the same message in dozens of languages. DIPLIM Unity. Revoked. Rules of engagement. Unrestricted. Kane looked around the chamber one more time, his gaze lingering on each group of delegates. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, but somehow more terrifying than any shout. "I am no longer bound by diplomatic protocols. I am no longer required to maintain peaceful relations. I am no longer your problem." He smiled one final time, and every alien in the room understood that they had made a terrible, fatal mistake. "I am your education." The transformation was subtle but terrifying. Kane's shoulders straightened, and his head tilted slightly, like a predator catching the scent of prey. The mild-mannered diplomat was gone, replaced by something much older and infinitely more dangerous. Thakmor noticed the change first. The human's eyes had become cold and calculating, measuring distances and angles. "Guards, arrest this human terrorist immediately." Kane laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Terrorist? Prime Minister. Terrorists use fear and chaos to achieve their goals. I prefer more direct methods." He moved with sudden, fluid motion. His hand shot out and pressed a sequence of buttons on the chamber's control panel. Immediately, heavy blast doors slammed shut over all the exits. Emergency lighting bathed the room in red, and the air recycling system powered down. "Security override accepted," announced the station's artificial intelligence. "Emergency lockdown initiated. This chamber is now sealed for 48 hours. Panic spread through the delegates as they realized they were trapped. Some rushed to the sealed doors, pounding uselessly on the thick metal. Others activated communication devices, only to find that all signals were being blocked. Kane stood calmly in the center of the chaos, adjusting his torn suit jacket. "The station's AI recognizes my diplomatic credentials. Unfortunately, those same credentials give me access to emergency protocols designed to contain dangerous situations." "This is madness," shouted Ambassador Velnash. "You cannot hold the entire Galactic Council hostage." Kane shook his head. "I am not holding anyone hostage. I am simply creating a controlled environment for a more honest discussion about human-alien relations." Thakmor roared and charged at Kane, his massive claws extended. The human waited until the last possible second, then stepped aside and struck the alien's wrist with surgical precision. Thakmor's hand went numb, and his claws retracted involuntarily. "Pressure point manipulation," Kane explained to the watching delegates. "Humans developed it for use against larger opponents. We have studied Craxi anatomy extensively." The 6 guards advanced on Kane from different directions. He moved between them like water, never staying in one place long enough for them to coordinate an attack. When Guard 4 fired his plasma rifle, Kane was already moving. The energy blast hit Guard 2 instead, dropping the alien to the floor. Kane reached Guard 1 and drove his elbow into the alien's throat. Craxi warriors were incredibly strong, but their necks were a vulnerable point that no amount of training could strengthen. Guard 1 collapsed, gasping for air. "Human anatomy texts are available in most galactic libraries," Kane said conversationally as he dodged another plasma blast. "But alien anatomy texts are classified military information. We had to acquire them through other means." Guard 3 swung his weapon like a club, But Kane caught the alien's wrist and twisted. The sound of breaking bones echoed through the chamber. Guard 3 screamed and dropped his weapon. Kane picked up the fallen rifle and examined it with professional interest. Zephyrian plasma technology. Impressive engineering, but the power cells have a critical flaw. He opened the weapon's housing and crossed 2 wires. The rifle immediately began sparking and smoking. He tossed the damaged weapon to Guard 5, who caught it instinctively. Electromagnetic feedback loop, Kane explained to the terrified delegates. Quite dangerous when the safety protocols are bypassed. Guards 4 and 6 fired together, their plasma beams crossing where Kane had been standing. But the human was already moving, using the chamber's elevated seating as cover. He vaulted over a row of chairs and landed behind the 2 guards. Crossfire is a basic tactical error, Kane said, as he struck pressure points on both aliens simultaneously. They collapsed instantly, their nervous systems temporarily shut down. Your military training manuals specifically warn against it. 8A. One of you be my. Kane straightened and looked around the chamber. 6 elite Craxi guards lay defeated in less than 2 minutes. The other delegates watched in horrified fascination as this mild diplomatic representative revealed himself to be a master of violence. Mind-reader Seklon pressed his hands to his temples, his face twisted in pain. His thoughts. They are like looking into an abyss. This human has killed thousands. The memories go back decades. Kane nodded acknowledgingly. 23 years of active service, Mind-reader Seklon. I participated in every major human conflict during that period. Border wars, colonial rebellions, alien incursions. He walked slowly toward the hegemony delegation, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. But my real education began when your people first contacted Earth. We knew this day would come. We knew you would never accept humans as equals. So we began preparing. Kane pulled out his tablet and displayed a series of images. Each one showed classified alien military installations, government buildings, and strategic resources. 3 years of diplomatic missions. 3 years of cultural exchanges and trade negotiations. 3 years of gathering intelligence on every major species in the galaxy. Thakmor stared at the images in growing horror. Those installations are classified beyond top secret. How did a human diplomat gain access? 1. Kane smiled coldly. Because you never suspected that Earth's most wanted war criminal would be sent as a diplomatic representative. You welcomed me into your most secure facilities. You gave me guided tours of your military bases. You showed me your weapons, your defenses, your strategies. He switched to another series of images showing detailed anatomical charts of different alien species. We learned where each race is most vulnerable. Craxi have weak necks and poor peripheral vision. Veltar cannot read minds through electromagnetic interference. Zephyrians depend too heavily on their cybernetic implants. The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of the emergency lighting. Kane continued his slow advance toward the hegemony delegates, who huddled together like frightened children. Earth has been preparing for war since the moment we learned we were not alone in the universe. Every diplomatic mission was reconnaissance. Every cultural exchange was intelligence gathering. Every trade negotiation was an assessment of alien capabilities. Kane stopped directly in front of Thakmor and looked up at the towering alien. You asked what humans could teach the galaxy. The answer is simple, Prime Minister. We can teach you about evolution. He gestured around the chamber at the defeated guards and terrified delegates. Every species in this room evolved on worlds with abundant resources and limited competition. You grew strong and confident and complacent. Humans evolved on a death world, where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to be paranoid, adaptable, and utterly ruthless. Kane's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. You wanted to judge whether humanity was ready to join galactic civilization. But you asked the wrong question. The question is whether galactic civilization is ready for humanity. He pressed another button on his tablet, and the chamber's communication systems crackled to life. This conversation is now being broadcast across the galaxy. Every species will witness what happens when the hegemony challenges human diplomacy. Thakmor tried to back away but found himself trapped against the sealed chamber wall. What do you want, human? Kane adjusted his tie and smoothed down his gray hair. When he looked up, his expression was that of a polite diplomat once again. But his eyes remained cold and predatory. I want to continue our diplomatic discussions, Prime Minister. I believe we were talking about humanity's place in the galactic community. Kane moved through the chamber like a teacher giving a deadly lesson. The emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to dance around him as he approached the remaining hegemony delegates. Each step was measured and deliberate, giving them time to understand what was coming. Let me tell you a story about human evolution, Kane said in a conversational tone. 60,000 years ago, our ancestors faced extinction, climate change, predators, competing humanoid species. Most rational beings would have found a safe place to hide and wait for better times. He paused next to the body of one of the fallen guards and picked up a plasma pistol. The weapon looked small in his hands, almost toy-like, but he handled it with the familiarity of long practice. But humans did something different. We adapted. We innovated. We learned to turn every disadvantage into a weapon. Kane checked the weapon's power setting with professional efficiency. When larger predators hunted us, we learned to hunt them back. When the climate turned against us, we learned to change the climate. Well, end quote. Technological Officer Zektar of the Zephyrians stood up from his seat, his cybernetic implants glowing with nervous energy. Human. This has gone far enough. We can negotiate a peaceful resolution. Kane turned toward the alien with genuine interest. Officer Zektar, your species interests me greatly. You have replaced 60% of your biology with mechanical components. An impressive achievement. He raised the plasma pistol and fired a single shot. The energy beam struck Zektar's primary neural processor, and the alien collapsed instantly as his cybernetic systems went into cascading failure. But also a critical vulnerability, Kane concluded. When you depend on technology for basic life functions, electromagnetic pulse becomes a death sentence. The other Zephyrians in the delegation began frantically checking their own implants, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. Kane nodded approvingly. Fear is an excellent teacher. Your species will remember this lesson. Commander Vexith of the Veltar delegation stood up slowly, his pale hands raised in a gesture of peace. Ghost of Proxima, we surrender. The Veltar will not resist. Kane shook his head. I appreciate the offer, Commander. But surrender is not an option. You see, this is not a battle. This is education. Every species in the galaxy is watching this broadcast. They need to understand what they are dealing with. He walked closer to the telepathic aliens, who huddled together in terror. Your people have a saying. The mind is the ultimate weapon, but you never learn to use it properly. You read surface thoughts and consider yourselves superior, but you never learn to truly understand your enemies. Kane activated a small device on his belt, and the Veltar delegates suddenly screamed in agony, clutching their oversized heads. Their telepathic abilities, usually their greatest strength, became a source of overwhelming pain as Kane's device generated electromagnetic interference. Humans developed this technology specifically for use against telepaths, Kane explained as the aliens writhed on the floor. We call it a psychic damper. It turns your enhanced brains into receivers for pure static. One by one, the Veltar delegates collapsed, their minds overwhelmed by the electronic noise. Kane switched off the device and continued his circuit of the chamber. The lesson here is adaptation. Humans study our enemies and develop specific countermeasures. We do not rely on natural advantages because we assume they can be neutralized. The neutral delegates watched in horrified fascination as Kane systematically eliminated the hegemony representatives. Some tried to look away, but they could not ignore the brutal efficiency of the humans' actions. Ambassador Velnash of the Centauri Republic spoke up, his voice shaking with fear. "This is genocide. You are committing war crimes." Kane paused and looked at the alien with mild surprise. "War crimes? Ambassador, this is a diplomatic meeting. I am simply defending myself against assault by hostile representatives. Everything I am doing is perfectly legal under galactic law." He gestured toward the sealed chamber doors. "You see, when the hegemony attacked a diplomatic representative, they voided all protection agreements. The station's AI has classified this as a self-defense situation. I am authorized to use any means necessary to protect myself." Kane returned his attention to the remaining hegemony delegates. Only a handful of Craxi warriors remained, including Prime Minister Thokmor. They had formed a defensive circle, but Kane could see the fear in their eyes. "The Craxi are impressive warriors," Kane said appreciatively. "Strong, fast, disciplined. Your species conquered half the galaxy through superior military force, but you made one critical error." He moved closer to their defensive formation, seemingly oblivious to their weapons and claws. "You never fought an enemy that was actively trying to evolve, faster than you could adapt." The Craxi charged as one, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. But Kane was ready for them. He had studied their tactics for 3 years, watching combat recordings and analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. The first warrior reached him with claws extended, but Kane was already moving aside. He struck the alien's knee joint with surgical precision, hyperextending it in a direction it was not designed to bend. The warrior fell with a scream of pain. The second warrior tried to grab Kane from behind, but the human ducked under the grasping arms and drove an elbow into the alien's solar plexus. Craxi anatomy had the same basic weaknesses as human anatomy, just positioned differently. Kane fought with a cold, mechanical precision that was more terrifying than any display of rage. He moved like a machine, designed specifically for killing. Each action calculated for maximum efficiency. Every strike hit a pressure point or nerve cluster. Every movement positioned him for the next attack. Within minutes, the remaining Craxi warriors lay defeated on the chamber floor. Kane stood among them, his suit torn and bloodied but his expression calm and professional. "The difference between humans and other species," Kane explained to the watching delegates, "is that we assume our enemies are intelligent. We plan for them to learn, to adapt, to become more dangerous. So we always try to evolve faster than they can." He looked around the chamber at the carnage he had created. Bodies of alien delegates lay scattered across the floor, victims of humanity's brutal efficiency. The neutral delegates watched him with a mixture of fear and respect. This is why Earth was never concerned about the hegemony's superior numbers or technology. Quantity and quality are temporary advantages. The ability to adapt and innovate is permanent. Kane walked slowly toward Prime Minister Thokmor, who stood alone against the far wall. The massive alien's scales had turned pale with fear, and his breathing was rapid and shallow. "Now, Prime Minister," Kane said politely, "shall we continue our diplomatic negotiations? I believe you were explaining why humanity is too violent to join galactic civilization." Thokmor stared at the human in terror, finally understanding the magnitude of the mistake the hegemony had made. They had not attacked a diplomat. They had awakened a monster that had been carefully disguised as a diplomat. And now that monster was ready to finish the lesson it had come here to teach. Prime Minister Thokmor pressed himself against the chamber wall, his yellow eyes wide with terror. The massive Craxi warrior, who had dominated galactic politics for decades, now looked like a frightened child facing a nightmare. Kane approached slowly, stepping carefully around the bodies of fallen delegates. His suit was torn and stained with blood, both his own and that of his enemies. But his expression remained calm and professional, as if this were just another diplomatic meeting. "Prime Minister, you seem distressed," Kane observed. "Perhaps we should take a moment to review the situation." He gestured around the chamber at the scattered bodies. 37 hegemony representatives entered this room. 36 are now dead or unconscious. I would say these negotiations are proceeding quite well. Thakmor tried to speak, but only managed a strangled growl. His hands shook as he pressed them against the wall, as if he could somehow push through the metal and escape. Kane picked up a chair and set it down in front of the alien leader. He sat down carefully, smoothing his torn jacket and adjusting his tie. The gesture was absurdly formal, given the carnage around them. "Let me explain the new reality, Prime Minister. The hegemony's military superiority was based on the assumption that other species would fight according to established patterns. You developed tactics to counter known threats, but humans do not follow established patterns." Kane pulled out his tablet and showed Thakmor a series of star charts. "While you were busy maintaining your empire, Earth was busy preparing for war. We have spent the last 20 years building a military force specifically designed to fight alien enemies." The charts showed human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Ships that had been disguised as trading vessels or exploration craft. Bases hidden in asteroid belts and dead systems. A vast network of military assets that had been positioned while the galaxy slept. Every human diplomatic mission carried military observers. Every trade agreement included intelligence gathering. Every cultural exchange was an opportunity to study alien psychology and tactics. Kane switched to another display, showing detailed psychological profiles of every major alien leader. "We know your weaknesses better than you know them yourselves." Thakmor finally found his voice. "What do you want from us?" Kane smiled, and for the first time it seemed genuinely pleased rather than predatory. "An excellent question. The answer is quite simple. We want nothing from you. We want everything from you." He stood up and walked to the chamber's central control panel. With a few quick commands, he activated the broadcast system at full power. Every screen in the galaxy would now carry this transmission. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," Kane announced, his voice carrying across space to billions of alien ears. "I am Colonel Marcus Kane of Earth, currently serving as humanity's diplomatic representative. Today, the hegemony attacked me during what was supposed to be a peaceful negotiation. They chose violence over diplomacy. They chose force over reason." Kane turned back toward Thakmor, making sure the cameras captured both the alien's terrified expression and Kane's calm demeanor. "Prime Minister Thakmor, please explain to the galaxy why the hegemony believed it could assault Earth's representative without consequences." Thakmor said nothing, his body trembling with fear and rage. Kane waited patiently for several seconds, then shrugged. "Very well. I will explain it myself. The hegemony attacked me because they believed humans were weak. They thought our small population and limited technology made us easy prey. They were wrong." He walked closer to Thakmor, who flinched away from the approaching human. "The truth is that humans are the most dangerous species in known space. We have been preparing for this moment since the day we learned we were not alone. Every human you have met has been gathering intelligence. Every friendly gesture has been a reconnaissance mission. Every peaceful interaction has been preparation for war." Kane reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple data chip. "This contains detailed military intelligence on every species in the hegemony. Ship designs, weapon specifications, tactical doctrines, strategic resources. Everything we need to destroy your empire completely." He held up the chip for the cameras to see. "But we do not want to destroy you. We want to replace you." The watching delegates gasped in shock. Even the neutral species had not expected such a bold declaration. Kane continued in the same calm voice. "The hegemony rules through fear and superior force. But fear is a temporary advantage. Superior force can be overcome with superior strategy. Humans rule through something much more powerful than either fear or force. He walked back to the control panel and input another series of commands. Suddenly, the sealed blast doors began to open, allowing fresh air to flow into the chamber. We rule through evolution. Every challenge makes us stronger. Every enemy teaches us new lessons. Every defeat shows us how to achieve victory. Kane turned to face the cameras directly. The hegemony made the mistake of attacking us before they understood what they were fighting. They will not make that mistake again. The blast doors finished opening, and station security personnel rushed into the chamber. They stopped in shock at the sight of the carnage, unsure of how to respond to what they were seeing. Kane raised his hands peacefully and stepped away from Thakmor. Station security. I am Ambassador Marcus Kane of Earth. I have been defending myself against assault by hostile delegates. All my actions have been in accordance with galactic law regarding diplomatic immunity. The security chief, a tall insectoid creature, looked around at the bodies in confusion. Kane straightened his tie and picked up his tablet. The hegemony attempted to intimidate humanity through violence. I provided them with a demonstration of why this was a poor strategic decision. He walked toward the chamber exit, stepping carefully around the bodies of fallen aliens. As he reached the doorway, he turned back toward Thakmor, one final time. Prime Minister, I would like to formally invite the Kraxi Empire to send new diplomatic representatives to Earth. We look forward to discussing the terms of your surrender at your earliest convenience. Thakmor tried to roar in defiance, but the sound came out as a weak growl. The proud warrior who had terrorized the galaxy for decades had been broken by one human in a torn suit. Kane nodded politely to the watching delegates. Ladies, gentlemen, and other distinguished representatives, thank you for your attention today. I believe this concludes our negotiations regarding humanity's membership in the Galactic Council. He walked out of the chamber as calmly as he had entered it, leaving behind a room full of corpses and a galaxy that would never again underestimate the diplomatic corps of Earth. 3 hours later, Kane sat in his quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel, typing his report on a standard tablet. He had changed into a fresh suit and cleaned the blood from his face. To anyone looking at him now, he seemed like a mild-mannered government bureaucrat finishing his paperwork. Mission report, he typed. Diplomatic negotiations with Galactic Council completed successfully. Terms extremely favorable to Earth interests. Hegemony, military threat, has been neutralized through demonstration of human capabilities. Recommend immediate deployment of Battle Fleet 7 to secure strategic positions while alien governments consider their response. Kane paused in his typing and smiled slightly. Personal note. Ambassador posting has been quite educational. Look forward to future diplomatic assignments. He finished the report and transmitted it to Earth Command. Then, sat back in his chair and poured himself a cup of coffee. Outside his window, the stars waited patiently for humanity to claim them. The age of human diplomacy had begun.